Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I am delighted to share with you an interview with the gorgeous Dan Clouser. Dan and I have known each other for a couple of years. He came on Your Words Have Power. Must be a couple of years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
He shared a bit more about his RV life. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, that's, what does it stand for?
Recreational vehicle.
Recreational vehicle. It's one of those big motorhome things.
It's a house on wheels, as my dog calls it.
Yeah, a house on wheels. There you go. So thank you. But this gentleman is a phenomenal podcaster and author, multiple author. So welcome, Dan. And I'd love to
Thank
know,
you.
just give us a little bit more about you and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I'd coached baseball and softball and ran a youth nonprofit sports organization for 30 years in Pennsylvania in the US. Um, if you would have talked to me in 2018, I would have told you that I would die doing what I was doing at that point. I absolutely loved it. We were helping kids, changing kids' lives for the better. And then all of a sudden, I guess you could say it was in my blood. My father is my father was a over the road trucker, and my mom in her 40s took an old 1967 Plymouth Valiant and took the back seat out of it and put a mattress and a sheet of plywood in there and kind of turned it into a quasi RV and traveled all around the country on her own. So I guess the travel bug was in my blood,
Mm-hmm.
and I took two solo road trips in 2019, and I kind of got this aha moment where I figured out why my mom did what she did. There's an incredible sense of serenity as I was on the road,
Mm-hmm.
and got back from those. And I had already published my first book at that time, The Beauty of a Diamond Through the Eyes of a Coach. It was originally published in 2012.
Oh, hang
I was
on,
in
slow down, slow down. What was the name of that book?
The Beauty of a Diamond Through the Eyes of a Coach. And the
Aha.
diamond is a baseball diamond.
Oh, oh, thank you for that, because I would have thought about sort of diamonds are a girl's best friend. Right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so no problem. I was adding chapters to that, and when I got back from those two road trips, I had written like I hadn't written in years, and really started, feeling a calling and hearing a voice telling me it was time to close the chapter I was in and open a new chapter and start using my words more, both written and spoken. And I did not embrace it initially. Um, like I said, I loved what I was doing, but finally kind of bought into the concept. Um, the organization I was running, I'd started. I was the founder of it. It was my baby, so it was tough to walk away from that.
Mm.
Um, I ran it by my wife, ran the idea by my wife about selling everything and you know hitting the road in an RV. She thought I'd lost my mind, um, but she was also at the time going through some issues with her employer. She had
Okay.
worked for 23 years in the oil and gas industry and had been laid off and was now working for another company, also in oil and gas. And when she took the job, it was a temp to full time position. However, she had been in the position almost 2 years and it was still temp.
Mm.
And any conversation about full time was kind of dodged or an excuse given as to why it couldn't happen. And
Mhm.
at one point, she came home and said, "You know what? I guess this is a sign as well. I'm in. Let's do it." So since we've hit the road, I've published three more books. I completed the 10 additional chapters in The Beauty of a Diamond Through the Eyes of a Coach, and then published three more since we've been on the road. So the
Mm.
inspiration to write on the road has certainly proven to work.
Fabulous, fabulous. So tell us a bit more. You've the original book was around your coaching experience with your baseball team.
Correct.
Can you
Yeah, and
share a bit
really,
about that?
absolutely. Yeah, it's a memoir about my coaching career and really my philosophy of teaching life lessons through the game, as opposed
Mm.
to a win at all cost philosophy.
Right.
And our teams did win. We were always very successful on the field, but that wasn't the end all be all. It was really more about teaching these kids how to be productive members of society once the game passes them by, because the game will pass us all by,
Yeah.
regardless how good we are. I mean, I've had players who've gone on to play in the major leagues, had players who've gone on to play professional minor league baseball, college baseball, but at some point, the game is going to say, I'm done with you, no matter how good you were. And at that point, you need to be a productive member of society. And that was really what my philosophy was in coaching. And one of the beautiful things about us traveling around is I get to see a lot of these players now that I've coached that are literally scattered throughout the country, and seeing them as adults now and what they are doing in society has been an incredible blessing. I mean, a lot of times we're planting seeds and we don't always get to see them bloom.
True.
And I've been blessed to be able to see a lot of my seeds in bloom now.
Oh, how precious. How precious. But getting back to your point about the fact that the game will be over at some point, we see quite a lot of public media on high profile sports people and also high profile singers, music people, media generally, who've hit the big time young, but without that grounding of what comes next. Because particularly when we're young, we think we're immortal and this is going to go on forever. So what you were doing was absolutely phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, I always wanted them to remember where they came from. And, again, regardless of what level they got to remember those roots, and, to remember that it was, really all going to be temporary, regardless of what level that was they got to.
Yeah, this too shall pass, whether good or bad. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay. So that was the one that came out, you said 2012 originally.
Correct.
And then you republished it in
2021.
Okay.
So nine years later.
And that was with extra chapters from your travels?
No, it was really leading up to our travels, and kind of a transition that our organization was going through, a transition that I was going through. So when I first published it in 2012, it had taken me 9 years to write it. And then I, 9 years later, republished it with 10 new chapters. So I tell everyone it was literally like an 18-year project, almost half my life at that point when it came out in 2021. Are
you going to do another re-edit, published version 3 in another 8 years?
I don't think so. I think this one is complete
Right.
as it is. Yeah.
You've closed the chapter.
Yes, indeed.
Beautiful. So that was redone in 21. But you mentioned another one, your journey from a mother's son.
Yeah.
Tell us
so
about
that came out in May of 2022.
Can you show us it?
Absolutely. So this is the cover of that one.
Journey of my mother's son. Many random thoughts from the road.
Yes, and you can see it's volume 1. So there are three more volumes to this coming out. The many random thoughts from the road is literally what that is. It's written somewhat in a journal form.
Okay.
So the chapters, the date that I wrote them is in there chronologically. So it chronicles the 6 months leading up to my wife and I selling the house and all of our stuff, and then our first 18 months of living in the RV full time. This August will be 4 years that we've been doing it. And obviously the title is a dedication to my mother.
Sure.
Kind of following her footsteps loosely.
With a little bit more luxury than the back end of a Plymouth.
Yes, no doubt about that. My brother, when he first saw our RV, he said to me, he says, "Bro, you're traveling a little bit more class than what Mom did." I said, "Yes, we are. I don't know that we could do this in a '67 Plymouth Valiant."
Yeah. Oh,
but,
lovely.
Yeah. So that one, and that the Journey of My Mother's Son is also the title of my podcast. And the volume 2 of that will be Many Little People. Subtitle of my podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places. So the book series is going to kind of model that in a way as well. And the subtitle of that podcast comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So
Nice.
volume 2 is Many Little People. Volume 3 will be Many Little Places. And volume 4 will be Many Little Pictures, which will be just a kind of a coffee table photo book
Ooh.
of pictures that we've taken of our travels. Nothing professionally done, all stuff that my wife and I have taken on our phones.
Mm-hmm.
The Many Little People will just talk about people that we've met on this journey. Some that was literally just a fleeting moment where we had a conversation with them for, a few minutes, maybe an hour. Some of them I may not remember their name anymore, but they still made an incredible impact on, on my life's journey. And then Many Little Places will just talk about, so many of the beautiful places that we've been to. And the toughest part of volume 2 and 3 is just like figuring out what and who to put in, because I know I'm going to offend somebody. But like the Many Little Places, I mean, people ask us all the time, what are the best, what are your favorite locations you've been to? And Sandy nor I can ever name them because there's just so much beauty that we've been able to experience on this journey. And even if we come up with a list of 5, once we get to number 5, then we think, oh, wait, this should probably be in here. And wait, this should be in here. So we don't even try anymore. So that's the challenge of volume 2 and 3 for sure. And I'm sure volume 4 with the pictures will be the same as well. Cause I can go watch the sunrise for, 15 minutes and take 30 pictures of it.
Yep. Guilty as charged. I mean, from what you're saying, your adventures and your RV, you actually get to see far more of the country than any of the rest of us who travel from in an airplane to point B. I mean, we were talking about it off camera about the joy of zipping in and out of different time zones wherever you're traveling, but particularly with you getting to experience. I mean, one thing I found when I was I love walking, and
So do I.
You get to feel the undulations. You actually get to feel the contours of the road or wherever you are, which you don't if you're sitting in a car. You getting the wonderful vistas as you're pounding down probably not pounding down the freeway or whatever, but you get to see so much more than from 37,000 feet.
Yes, no doubt. And actually, I write about that in the book. That's one of my chapters is the drive. And, because I talk about that a lot of times, I do probably 95% of the driving. Every once in a while, if we got a long day of travel, Sandy will jump in and take us rest area to rest area, just enough to give me a break. But I do the bulk of it. And a lot of times I bust her chops that I do most of the driving, but truly I love it. I don't mind. I love being behind the wheel. It's one of the greatest parts of, what we do is just that drive. Cause like you said, you get to see those mountains. I mean, I still remember coming across North Dakota. We were coming from Minnesota, going east to west across North Dakota, and just the way the landscape changed from the eastern part of North Dakota to the western part of North Dakota, where it's very flat and plains on the eastern side. And then as you get west, you start seeing the Badlands and the buttes and all those sort of things. And it's just incredible how, just in the blink of an eye, the landscape starts to change. So I really do enjoy the drive as much as anything about what we do.
Yeah. And you're so much higher up in the RV as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. I have not been in one. I've seen them from a distance, but I have yet to step foot in one. But you were saying about meeting some interesting people. Little digression. I'm here in Kuala Lumpur. Yesterday I went to the market and there was a tandem. A tandem bicycle in Malaysia. Well, there was a lady attached to it, so I had to go and say hello to her. She's from Brussels, just south of Brussels.
Hmm.
And she and her partner are doing a cycling tour of Malaysia.
Wow.
And of course, they had to take the tandem on the plane and get it back again. And oh, what an interesting way to see the countryside.
Yeah.
And of course, being on a tandem, everybody's looking at them going, what the? It's not a common occurrence having two people on one bicycle.
Yeah. No, that's pretty cool. We met in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan a couple years ago. We met a woman who was riding her bike from Washington State to Delaware. And by the time she had finished, she would have set a world record for being the oldest female to ride her bike across the country.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was pretty wild. We had just pulled into a rest area, and she had an escort truck, so I knew she was on a long bike ride.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't expect the answer I got when I asked her. I'm like, so how many miles are you riding today? And she said 65, and I was like, whoa, that's a serious bike ride. And then she started to tell me that she was riding across the country, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, that is really, really cool. Cindy Norris was her name. I'm still hoping to get her on my podcast at some time to talk to her, but she completed that, and pretty cool to again, that's just one of those 5-10 minute encounters that we had that has made an incredible impact on me.
Yeah. And that brings us beautifully into your podcast. Because I was going to ask you, you've got this podcast, The Journey of a Mother's Son,
Yes.
and you've had how many episodes under your belt now?
We are right around 280, give
Wow.
or take. Yeah.
That's great because, as you know, podcasts tend to disappear up to or beyond 10. They often
Yeah.
don't get beyond that. So all power to you, sir. Well done.
Thank you.
My question would be, what came first, the book or the podcast?
So the book came first, published in 2012. However,
Mm-hmm.
shortly after the first book, I did actually start hosting a different podcast that was called Stepping Up to the Plate with Big Vision Foundation, which was the organization I had run back in Pennsylvania. And what's funny about that is I actually um, was requested to be a guest on a podcast to talk about my book. And at that time, I had no idea what a podcast even was. So again, this was 2012. So this was just a couple months after my book was published, if even a couple months. And when I went in, I did the interview, and the woman that produced the show, not the woman that interviewed me, but the woman that produced the show, she actually produced multiple podcasts. So she started talking to me about our organization and said, you should host a podcast to talk about the organization, to interview sponsors and alumni and promote events. And again, I'm like, I don't even know what a podcast is. But I let her talk me into it, and it was a different format than what my current show is, where it was literally interviews between about 12 and 15 minutes.
Okay.
Um, Everything was done face to face in a
Mm-hmm.
studio. So we would record one day out of the month and do 4 shows.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have 4 guests come in basically in 15, 20-minute intervals, knock out 4 interviews. I would leave the room, had no idea what happened after that, other than I got a link that we would send out in an email blast to our email list. And it was a lot of fun. So when I started um, thinking about starting this new chapter, at that point, like, I loved podcasting. I loved the platform.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed having conversations. Um, and I think that show went on for, like, I'm almost like equal to those 2 shows now. I think that show ended at episode 279.
Right.
Um, and so I've just surpassed how many I did on that original show. But I talked to my producer at the time, and I said, Tony, I really want to continue to podcast while we're on the road, because I think it would be really cool to interview people that we meet along the way and tell their
Mm,
stories. I think, you don't have to be rich and famous and, you know, a household name to inspire people. I think we all
exactly.
have incredible stories. So she helped me, and we started off kind of with the same, in-person type of interviewing.
Mhm.
She had produced my first 4 or 5 shows, but then was also her and another friend of mine that hosts a podcast were simultaneously showing me the back end of, what platform to use, you know, how to edit it, how to get it out there. Because again, I knew none of how that happened at that point.
Mhm.
And I then, the plan was to conduct face-to-face interviews with people we
Sure.
met in our travels. And then COVID happened. And I was maybe 3 or 4 shows in, and it forced me to resort to technology and using
Mm,
Zoom, which initially I was against, because it was different. It wasn't what I wanted it to be, but it has allowed me to expand my guest base enormously. So, now I love doing the virtual shows. And a lot of times, like I'll even interview some of my players that we meet along the way. And there was a time where we would, if we had dinner or something, we'd get together in the RV and we would just record in person. And I've gotten to a point where I don't even do that anymore, because I feel that takes away from our time together.
mhm.
So I tell them, like, hey, we need to do a podcast, but I'll send you a link and you can schedule it and we'll do it on Zoom, because I
Yeah.
don't want getting together with one of my players that I might not have seen in, 5 or 10 years, and feel that now it's like a business meeting. Like, okay, we're done eating. Let's go sit down and, throw microphones on and have this
Mm,
conversation. I want to enjoy that time and, really, you know,
yeah.
seize that moment with them, as opposed to that. So at this point, I do very few face-to-face interviews. There will be some, here and there, but when I have the opportunity, I try to actually resort it to Zoom.
Sure. Sure. No, I totally understand, because it does. You want to spend time with people, don't you? Think fully present in the moment. And
Yes.
these are people that you haven't seen in donkeys. Of course, you want to catch up. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Absolutely.
How do you find the difference between, from an energetic perspective, sitting in the same room as somebody? Can you feel that same in connection presence with somebody on Zoom? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I can. Even when I first started, even like I said, even though I was somewhat reluctant to do it, I kind of felt it, you know, pretty much right out of the gate.
Mm,
I was able to do that. And again, one of the cool things about us traveling is I've been able to, um, meet someone virtually and do a podcast with them, and then find out we're traveling through the area that they're in and get together with them. So I've been able to, actually meet my guests, some of my guests in person, definitely over a dozen
mm,
times. I've been able to reach out to one of my old guests and say, hey, I told you on the podcast, if we were coming through your neighborhood, I'd look you up, and
yeah.
here we are. As a matter of fact, when we get to Arizona, actually I was on his show. I was a guest on his show, but we'll we'll end up getting together with a host on a show that I was on, which is, again, it's just so cool.
It is good, isn't it? I mean, I have my first day of recording. I did one on Zoom with somebody in Perth, and the second day of recording, I actually went to somebody's studio in person here in Kuala Lumpur. This is a guy I met online when I was still in Perth. Yes, I was still in Perth, and it was fun just to go, you're real, give him a poke, and actually get a great big hug from him, because he's a gorgeous 6'4" gentleman. But yeah, so that was the only one that I've done in person. And his studio is set up with bells and whistles and different camera angles. And I'm going,
Yeah.
I'm just doing a Zoom. So
Right.
it for me, it felt great to have somebody in person, and there was that extra chemistry. But I'm also aware of when working. It for me, it felt a little technical.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just you and the camera is by far the easiest way of doing it for
Oh
me.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I can so feel that energy. I mean, you and I have spoken before. And in fact, thank you. I've been a guest on your podcast in the past. In
Yes.
fact, you were a guest on my previous podcast, Quirky Inspirations. So
Yes.
I'm great. It's lovely to get back together and particularly focus on the from page to stage. Now, the reason I was mentioning the energy thing is because I'm working with a lot of authors who are reluctant to do the speaky bit. My work speaks for itself as they hold up a book, and I go, oh, how's your book sales? Ah. Now, you're somebody who gets up and talks about your book, aren't you? Because you do book signings all around the country.
Yes.
So for me, it's really important to work with the authors to get them to go, you're not only an author, you can be an author and a speaker. It's not an either or. Tell us a bit more about which do you find easier, the writing or the speaking? How do those marry up for you?
I would say I definitely find the writing easier and comes more natural to me. Um, Speaking, there was a long time where like I just had major stage anxiety before speaking. Like with my old organization, we would have an annual banquet, and for the longest time I was the quote unquote MC. So I wasn't even really um, given a keynote or anything like that, but I would not be able to eat my meal during the banquet because I was that nervous that I figured if I ended up eating, I would probably be running to the bathroom to puke before I got up behind the podium. And again, all I was doing was introducing other people. And slowly, I can't say there was any trick that I came up with, um, but slowly it just became, more and more natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now, I mean, there's always still going to be, butterflies and, that sort of thing before I speak, but nothing like that. And I really do feel an energy, when I'm in a room, and when you kind of are looking around the room and you see how people are engaging with what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and I had this conversation when I did your event, when I talked about how awkward I felt doing a virtual speech because I didn't feel that energy in the room, which is kind of funny where, we just talked about on a podcast and a one-on-one, I can feel the energy. But
Yeah.
if I'm just looking at a screen of, a dozen or 20 people,
Boxes.
yeah, like I don't feel that energy. And
Mm.
and that was very awkward for me to do a virtual talk. Because again, a lot of times, you know, when I'm on the stage, I'm walking, I'm moving from left to right, I'm making eye contact, where you can't do that on a Zoom virtual speech.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully I will gradually, adapt to that the way I did
Mm.
just speaking in general.
Yeah.
Um, but I do feel an energy when I'm speaking to a room of people, and again, just looking out over it and seeing how people, are nodding their head, or you can see in their eyes that you're striking a chord with them, and that
Mm.
sort of thing. I do kind of thrive on that.
Cool. Cool. And the reason I was asking about that is because, as I said, some of our authors are, oh, don't know about this. And that thought of, as you were saying, I mean, MC work is a skill in and of itself. And just as needed, good MCs are just as needed as good keynotes. That's another
Mhm.
matter. But when you were in that sort of mode, that's very often what the authors find with the even idea of speaking. So this is where, for me, getting them on a podcast and working with them to achieve that level of familiarity, I won't say comfort, because sometimes it's not comfortable, but we
Mhm.
still have to do it. The familiarity of the one-on-one. because most people can talk to one person. And when you're on a podcast, it's you, the camera, the other person. Yes, we need to remember the audience, and the audience are so important. So this is where the work that I do with authors to get them onto podcasts particularly is to go, okay, how can we include the audience so that it's not purely a conversation that the audience are going, oh, that's all good and well. What's that got to do with me?
Right.
It just feels like I'm earwigging in somebody else's conversation. So that's the sort of thing that we're working on. So that's why I'm always pulling it back to the questions that people say to me. Oh, but I can't do that because. Well, here's an example of a gentleman who can and does. He didn't always, but he does now.
Yeah.
Well
and from a marketing standpoint, for authors out there who are hesitant, people feel like they get to know you when you're in a speaking setting like that, and you will sell more books at a speaking engagement than you will, simply on Amazon or whatever, online sales, or, even at a, traditional book signing sort of thing. When you can engage with people and they kind of get a little peek at who you are, it does help with sales. And again, that's if you're genuine. They can also read through if you're just up there and trying to give a sales pitch. That won't work. You won't sell much of anything at that point. But if you're up there and you're genuine and you're able to tell some stories and hit some chords with them, it will pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that I'm working with the authors to think about is, as I said, the getting on. There are different sorts of stages. I mean, we've already mentioned there's keynoting and there's emceeing, and those two have different skill sets. But doing the podcast is one thing. Doing a virtual stage, you've already explained that you find that a bit of a challenge, more so than the actual physical stage. But people seem to have, it's all about what they tell themselves. I can talk to one person. I can't talk to more. Why not? What's going on there? So we do a lot of sort of teasing out of those, what I call internal scripts, the stories we tell ourselves. You were saying about doing a reading. Those are so powerful, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because then when you can hear the author speaking their own words. When we did the first book I was involved with last year, this one, whether you can see it all the way down to the bottom, we had a book launch in the State Library of Western Australia, and 6 of the authors were based in Perth. I offered the girls a coaching session, and every one of them did such a phenomenal story, told their stories, because we only had about a 5-minute clip, but we chose a snippet, one of those teasers, and they brought those words to life. And they were all stunned. Feedback I've had from people who were there later on was, what a difference. What a difference it makes hearing the author speak their own words, because I took the book away, all signed, and then I went to particularly the authors that were there, and I read their chapters first, and I could hear their voice in my head as I was reading. So powerful. So powerful.
Yeah, it is.
So you go around the country doing book signings. Do you do readings as well while you're there?
I haven't done a whole lot of readings yet, just because most of my book signings are actually in grocery stores.
Okay.
So I'm part of a program called National Authors in Grocery Stores, which has been a great program for me. And I sign, I can pick the dates and pick the locations that I want to sign in. And I go in and I sign at a lot of Kroger's and Kroger affiliates here in the US. And like I said, it's been a great program that I've been involved in so far. I mean, we're wrapping up this most recent book tour. We're in Texas at the time of this recording. We're heading to Arizona for my last 3 book signings. And again, it's so cool because, I went into the program with zero expectations, just not knowing what I would, get out of it.
Mhm.
And it's been such a blessing. I mean, you get to, again, tell your story to people one-on-one, sign your book. They're taking, their picture with you. I had a woman the other week, she bought one of my children's books, which is actually written as though our dog is the author.
Oh,
So
go on, show us, show us.
she,
There's
uh,
a flash.
she asked where the dog was at the time. This is his book. It's Four Paws and Six Wheels Across America.
That's
The
so gorgeous.
adventures, the adventures of Youkilis, the golden retriever. Um, and so I said, well, he's out in the RV with his mommy right now. And she's like, well, could I go out and get a picture with him? And so I called Sandy. I said, hey, Yuke's going to have a fan stop out for a picture. And sure enough, she went out and got her picture taken with the book and with Youkilis. And again, stuff like that is just really, really cool when people are really engaging like that.
Mm. So you shown us the two that you've written. Luke's done two, hasn't he?
Yes, he's also done a coloring book, which is this
Oh,
one here, Color with Uke, which is just, black and white illustrations of his journey that um,
beautiful.
youngsters or adults can take and fill in the color that they would like on his adventures. And yeah, it's just kind of a companion to the children's book.
Well, you're hitting two markets there because you're getting the children interested in from Luke's perspective.
Yeah,
And of course, very often the parents are reading the stories to the children, and then hello,
yeah,
nice bit of marketing there. So well done.
yeah. Which is funny. Just as a side note to that, um, my first two books, I had originally worked with a publisher, and we'll leave them nameless because it was not a great experience. I then pulled my intellectual property and republished those independently through Amazon KDP. Um, but there was still this thing in my head that thought I wasn't really a true author unless I had a work published by a publisher. Um, and the next book I was working on was the children's book. And I had met with a publisher, and she had told me point blank that the children's book was a terrible idea, and that I had no niche because my first book was about baseball and coaching, and my second book was about traveling full time and living in the RV. And now I wanted to go down yet another path with a children's book, that would just be an awful idea. As a matter of
Okay.
fact, the one quote she said is that, I hate to be the one to tell you that your baby is ugly. And obviously, I did not listen to her. At that point, I figured I'd talked to enough other authors that were independently published that they said, yeah, you know what? If you want to do it, don't even worry about a publisher. Just go independent, publish your KDP. It's easy enough.
Mm.
You're already doing the hard work, so just do it that way, and then you have control of everything. So my top selling book to date is this book, the book that I was told, um,
It's
you
an
know,
ugly baby.
it was an ugly
Oh.
baby. Yeah. So, for any author out there that, is dabbling in different genres or whatever, if that's you, that's you. Like just write, like don't let anyone tell you, that you're too broad or, you need to find your niche. Because I look at writing, some people write and use it as a business card and, use it to open up doors for other business, and that's fine. I write and consider it art. So the fact that one of my books is a memoir about my baseball coaching career, one of them is a memoir about my travels, and I've got a children's book and a coloring book. Like that's just who I am. And that even goes back to my podcast where I've had people say, well, you have too broad of a range of guests on your podcast. You have some former, players, you have former professional players, you have life coaches, you have speaking coaches, you have, but I'm like, at the end of the day, all the people I have are interesting people with an inspiring story. And that's the common thread. It doesn't matter what else their background is. And ultimately, they're people that I want to talk to and have a conversation with. And I know that others are inspired by those conversations.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. We're channeled to go niche, 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 niche. And in a way, this is what I'm doing with From Page to Stage. For me, it's easier to identify the ideal audience, and it's feeding into that. So authors listening, Dan's telling some wonderful wisdom here. If it makes sense to you, if it energetically aligns for you, and you know who you're writing to, there will be different audiences, but just as you're writing to a specific audience, you can speak to a specific audience as well.
Absolutely.
On that front, I've got to tell you a bit of cultural faux pas over the last couple of weeks. I both actually with American friends that I was interviewing, and they were getting one of them was a blank look and the other was a downright embarrassed look. And I went, okay, said something that doesn't culturally relate. I won't share that, but it was in the newsletter last week. So if you picked up the newsletter, you'll understand what I was on about. Knowing your audience, and if you are using things that could be culturally related, explaining what they are. It's pure and simple. Okay. Yeah. So Dan, thank you. You've told us about you told us what brought you to your first book. You've told us that podcasting the writing came first and then the podcast.
Yeah.
And that the two of them are going beautifully in tandem at the moment, aren't they?
Yes. Yes.
When are you planning to put volume 2 out?
My hope is to have it out this year yet in 2024. Cool. That, because I've kind of got a streak going here of 21, 22, 2 published in 23. Ooh. And, want to keep the streak going of 24 as well.
And that'll be the people?
Yes.
Many little people. Right.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. How exciting. Are you thinking towards the end of the year?
Yes. Yeah, probably toward the end of the year.
Right.
Yep.
So out in time for Christmas presents. Nice.
Yes, that would be the goal.
Good one. Okay. So that's when that's coming. For our audience, is there something that you would like to share with our audience? Something that you've got coming up specifically?
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and give the audience a 20% discount on any of my books.
That's very generous of you. Thank you.
Yeah, we will get a link. I don't know for sure yet if it'll be a link to my website or to Amazon, but one way or another we will get them a 20% discount on my books. Yeah.
Sorted. Thank you very much. The information as to how to get hold of Dan, how to listen into his wonderful podcasts, and there are lots of them. We're going to put those on we're going to put that in the show notes. Best way of reaching Dan himself, that will be there as well. So please do engage with this gorgeous man. His work is prolific. He is such a creative guy, and he's also incredibly interesting to talk to. So as you've experienced. So that's where we're at for the moment. And as we're winding up, Dan, is there anything that you can share, got a tip or two that you can share with our authors, how you go about bringing your words to life as you're speaking?
So I think number one, and this is more for kind of aspiring authors who are still going through the process, is just write. Like I said, that first book essentially turned into an 18-year project. Hopefully they can speed it up a little bit more than that. But just write. And then obviously it gets easier because after that first one taking 18 years to be fully complete, we've since published 3 in the 3 years following that. So it does become easier. And, back to what I'd said earlier about don't be so concerned about, if you're doing multiple titles, about finding a niche, so to speak. Just, if you want to write about whatever you want to write about it, and truly view it as art, because, creativity and writing is truly a gift from God, without a doubt. So use it.
Absolutely. The other interview I've done today was a gentleman who's also written some poetry, but he's never published. Okay. Oh, please do. Please do. There's so much creativity going on, and thank you very much. It's very generous of you. We got the 20% off, and we've got that. Really let it flow. I won't do the Nike advert, but yeah, just get on with it.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to speaking on the back of your book, and absolutely in the advance of it, because you've got to get the marketing of your books out there, getting your voice heard so that your audience can hear your voice, so that you're giving those teasers. Just amuse-bouche. Just bring them in.
Yeah.
I get excited. So thank you so much, Dan. Is there anything I've missed off? Anything else you'd like to?
No, I always love getting together and having a chat with you. So I really appreciate you having me on the show. And I hope that there's some authors out there who, this conversation will get them over the hump if they're, hesitant about getting on stage, get on stage. And again, just it all goes together, whether you like it or not. And look, most of us write because we aren't comfortable with speaking initially,
Exactly.
but it's the first key to open that door to getting on stage.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan, for sharing with us from page to stage.
Thank you, Wendy.